Plus, Star Trek has always had another disadvantage on toy aisles: the lack of scalable vehicles for the figures to interact with. There are no tanks or personal fighters or anything. Because of that, the starships are always little die-cast toys or medium-sized plastic toys that don't accommodate the figures. And rarely did toy makers in the 1980s manufacture anything but the Enterprise. Very few enemy ships, and most of those were small die-cast versions. So consider that when you played Star Trek and you went to warp speed, you had to leave that bridge playset behind, stuff the figures from your away team into your pockets, then grab your Enterprise independently.
Fletcher's on. Red alert. Phasers stand by to fire on my order.
I don't think it can be overstated just how much of a pipe dream an action figure scale USS Enterprise is for a Star Trek fan. The realities of the Star Trek universe make figure-based toys quite the challenge. Starships with scores of decks that are longer than football fields don't end up being great toys when you make the compromises needed to incorporate action figures. Anyone remember Darth Vader's Star Destroyer, people? The Millennium Falcon ended up being bigger, but more on that in another video. We've had Star Trek since 1966, and we've had Star Trek toys almost as long. But until Playmobil decided to attempt the impossible, we've never had Star Trek figures that can go inside a Starship Enterprise toy. And don't start with me about the Inner Space Toy series. Those were micro-figurines in gimmicky transformable micro-machine style environments. Let's not split hairs. You know what I mean when I say action figure scale vehicle. Unfortunately for Star Trek, even at the height of its popularity, the series never had the retail clout to inspire a toy as large as the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier. Playmates toys made one single bridge environment, but left the ship itself in a separate scale, in the grand tradition of Star Trek figure toys.
My God, that's a big ship.
Not so big as her captain, I think.
From an engineering perspective, Playmobil was taking a risk. From a price point perspective, Playmobil was taking a risk. From a license perspective, Playmobil was taking a risk.
Risk is our business. That's what the Starship is all about.
Historically, Star Trek rivals only Indiana Jones in the popular but not popular enough to sell many toys department. But they did it anyway, and have earned their reputation as a miracle worker during an era of toy history in which companies are risk-averse and uninspired in their product offerings. Before we get into the details of this toy, I just want to tell you how much I enjoyed the process of building this ship. Normally in a toy review, I don't even think about the assembly experience. But in this case, it must be acknowledged the sheer fun I had building Playmobil's Starship Enterprise. Playmobil has always occupied a space somewhere between LEGO and traditional figure toys, where the build experience is a deliberate part of the fun, but the final result is a finished toy and not a stack of linked bricks. And with their USS Enterprise, it's one of the most fun memories I've had building a toy in my entire life. And that's not hyperbole. I truly mean that. I spent an evening listening to the original Star Trek the Motion Picture score while I stayed up past 2 a.m., carefully assembling the Enterprise. The feeling I got was not dissimilar to that moment in the 1979 film when Kirk sees the refurbished Enterprise for the first time in dry dock. As the ship came together, I was impressed that Playmobil didn't compromise on the quality of the materials used in its structure. I was equally impressed that the ship was still very much a Playmobil toy from stem to stern. While it might be out of a child's price range, they did not make changes to the philosophy they have put into all of their toys, keeping it fun and durable. A child can safely play with this toy just like any other Playmobil product. Playmobil made sure the main focal point deco on the Enterprise, such as the saucer letters, the nacelle details, and Starfleet insignias on the secondary hull, were permanently painted onto the toy. In other words, you can't screw these up by getting them off center, so the ship is guaranteed to look amazing even if you're not great with decals. And brace yourself because there are plenty of decals to deal with in the bridge interior and the engineering section of the ship, as well as some exterior accent stickers. Getting this ship looking choice takes a lot of patience and some time commitment, but settle in and enjoy the ride, because the build is both fun and very well thought out by Playmobil's designers. For example, they made sure that the main turbolift door onto the bridge was a lenticular motion decal, which shows the doors opening and closing. The designers gave us a lenticular decal for the viewing screen, but they also made the area around the main viewer large enough to slot in a smartphone. So you can literally have the crew of the Enterprise encountering anything your phone can bring up. The intuitive functionality built into the Playmobil Enterprise doesn't end there. Playmobil has incorporated Bluetooth-capable electronic lights and sounds into the ship tethered to a mobile app. If you're intimidated by the thought of assembling that, don't be. The designers made sure all the wires have phone jack-type connectors at the ends to click into their intended destinations with no guesswork required. If that wasn't enough, Playmobil went the extra mile and designed the Enterprise to only function when a dilithium crystal is properly seated in the warp core. Removing the crystal releases a pressure-sensitive button.
My ship, whom I love like a woman, is disabled. Oh, Lord.
And you don't have to run it off batteries. A USB-C port is provided on the starboard side to power the electronics if you wish. The Enterprise can be activated in main engineering at the push of a button.
This is Captain James Kirk of the U.S.S. Enterprise.
And the warp drive. Photon torpedoes, and red alert lights and sounds can be controlled directly from buttons on the main bridge console. Or these lights and sounds, as well as a number of others, can be activated via Bluetooth from your phone through the Playmobil Enterprise app. While I've never been a huge fan of mobile app gimmicks for toys, at least the app is stable and works well, while unlocking a lot more of the sound features on the ship.
Live long and prosper.
I do worry what happens when Playmobil stops supporting this app, as many of these sounds, like Spock's voice and others, will be trapped inside the toy's electronic system until some enterprising modder, no pun intended, comes along and unlocks all of the files. Playmobil has even provided 2 ways to display NCC 1701. A robust table stand, complete with an identification plaque, and a more unconventional ceiling hanging setup that threads through various points on the ship to allow you to let it suspend somewhere in your house off the floor. What does the ship lack? Well, for all of its size, the omission of a transporter room is something of a letdown. I completely understand there was nowhere left to cram it, but it is missed nonetheless. I feel like they might have been able to put it somewhere at the back of the saucer, even if scaled down to one platform. But I do understand the challenge here. Playmobil seems to have dodged this deliberately by keeping the famous transporter sound effect out of the ship's library altogether. However, that does result in an audio library for this toy that feels somewhat incomplete. The Enterprise also lacks her famous phaser firing sounds, which I'll admit is a disappointment. I also wish the turbo lift opened so figures could get in and out of it, but yeah, in this case there's nowhere for the turbo lift to take anyone. I just feel actual whoosh doors would have been fun. Okay, I've saved discussing the figures for last for a very specific reason. Within the past few years, as Playmobil has taken on licenses like Ghostbusters and Back to the Future, and made some of the best toys ever created for those properties, I keep seeing a cry from fandom out there in the den that they hate the Playmobil figures, and they wish Playmobil would make the vehicles compatible with 3 3/4-inch action figures from other makers. They want to be able to put their reaction Marty McFly into the Playmobil DeLorean time machine. They want the Star Trek figures from other lines to scale with the new Enterprise. You get where they're going. But my thought is this. Nobody has asked LEGO to change their legacy figurines or modify their designs to work with toys from other companies. Why are they asking this of Playmobil, whose figures are just as proprietary and just as much a fixture of the classic toy space as LEGO? I believe collectors are seeing what an amazing job Playmobil has done in creating the best-looking figure vehicles ever, and they wish companies like Hasbro, Mattel, NECA, and Super 7 had put the same level of effort into their licenses. They seem to forget that Playmobil has as much right to their designs as any other company. So I'll say this. If you refuse to accept these figure designs from a legacy toy company like Playmobil, and you feel you're entitled to demand Playmobil throw away their figure designs to serve the shortcomings of other toy companies, then that's your delusion and your loss. And you're missing out on some amazing toys, arguably the best around right now. Playmobil knows how to make vehicles and figures that work perfectly together. Each vehicle they've made is aesthetically perfect on the outside, while on the inside being precisely purpose-built for any figure in their range, just like any Lego figure can interact with any Lego set, no matter how new or old. It's brilliant, and I love it. The Starship Enterprise comes with the entire classic crew: Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, Uhura, Sulu, and Chekhov. Uhura is given something akin to her iconic earpiece. Spock has his tricorder, McCoy has his famous hypospray gadget, and there are enough phasers and communicators to distribute amongst the rest of the crew. Yes, the communicators even flip open. If I had any gripe about the figure aspect of this set, it's the fact that the bridge chairs are so perfectly replicated, the figures don't have a secure way to stay seated. This isn't generally a problem unless you accidentally bump the Enterprise, and then they perfectly simulate all the performers throwing themselves around the set while the crew shakes the film camera. These just don't have the same precision as the vehicle seating in many Playmobil cars and trucks. Don't misunderstand, it isn't difficult to get them in the chairs. They sit pretty well, except Uhura, where the skirt extension makes sitting more finicky. Otherwise, they all stay in their seats just fine most of the time. For added fun, Playmobil gives you a bag of tribbles to use anywhere on the ship you like. A special storage compartment in the front of the main viewer holds their gear and an extra dilithium crystal. Overall, the scaling of the bridge to the figures is excellent. The engineering section starts to feel cramped by comparison, but when you consider they could have only included the bridge itself, and how the original series engineering section was a flat front, vertical space in the show, it's a nice bonus to have with the ship. I get that a lot of collectors seem to be put off by the Playmobil figures, but first to the moon is first to the moon, and I doff my cap to the toy company in the 2020s taking these chances and making high-quality figure toys with vehicles and playsets. And when that company decides to be the first company ever to make a USS Enterprise that's in scale with its posable figures, I don't just doff my cap. I kneel out of genuine respect. Hell, it makes me love their legacy figure designs more than ever. Playmobil truly looked at Star Trek toys and said, what is the final frontier for Star Trek action figures? A Starship vehicle toy that can actually carry them with a full bridge for the entire crew. And they went boldly in that direction where no toy company has gone before, and they succeeded. When I look at all of the big legacy toy makers still around right now, if I was told that all of them would disappear tomorrow except the one I chose to spare, I would, without hesitation, pick Playmobil to live long and prosper.